Hello and welcome. My name is Scott Jensen, and I'm a principal sales engineer here at Walme. I am happy to be your host today for today's webinar, From Resistance to Resilience, Real-World Tactics for Frictionless Tech Change. We have some exciting stuff in store for you. This is the first webinar, actually, in a two-part series aimed at demystifying constant tech change and AI with digital adoption. We'll share more info about part 2 of this series at the end of today's call, but today is all about change, changing how we think about digital adoption and transforming our approach to overcoming challenges posed by changes within our organizations. We've put together a session that's packed with insights, stories, and practical tips. From KPMG's firsthand experiences, we're set to uncover the nitty-gritty in maneuvering through the challenges of technology change and the impressive outcomes when digital adoption strategies are leveraged effectively. And remember, following this recorded segment, we will have a live Q&A session. We encourage you to use the chat to ask questions, share your experiences, and make the most out of this session. It's your opportunity to see Walme DAP in action and envision how it can fit into and benefit your organization. If you are joining us today, you will receive a recording of the webinar to rewatch at your convenience or to share with others. But without further ado, let's kick things off and turn resistance into resilience together. Today, I have the privilege of sitting down with Matt O'Malley, Director of Digital Adoption, and Amy Pasilla, Manager of Digital Workplace from KPMG, to discuss KPMG's DAP journey and how it has transformed their organization. Before we dive into the discussion, however, let me share a bit about Walme for those of you who may be unfamiliar. Walme is a digital adoption platform, or DAP, that empowers organizations to navigate change and improve user adoption of technology. Our platform guides users through complex workflows in real time, providing personalized support and boosting productivity. Our goal is to help businesses achieve their business goals by removing the friction in technology change. We're excited to show you how Walme DAP can benefit your organization through a live demo after our discussion with Matt and Amy. Stay tuned for that. But now let's get into it. Welcome to the webinar, Matt and Amy. Let's get started with you, Matt. Could you tell us about your role at KPMG?
Yep, thank you, Scott. I appreciate the introduction. So hi, everybody. I'm Matt O'Malley, and I'm the Director of Digital Adoption for KPMG in the United States. And my colleague Amy is joining us. And Amy, if you could introduce yourself.
Of course. Hi, everyone. My name's Amy Pasilla, Manager Digital Workplace at KPMG.
Excellent, thank you. So good morning and good evening to everybody. As Scott had mentioned, this webinar is going to be focused on the idea not only of working, but thriving in constant technology change. We're going to use the word organization today interchangeably, which means your focus can be internal employees or external customers, right? So Amy and I are going to cover a few topics that we think could be beneficial for adoption groups of any size or any proficiency. But really, this presentation is time for you to explore. It's really yours, right? So as you're listening to our story today, I want you to ask yourself a couple of questions that are lined up with this agenda you see in front of you. So number one, what do I already know about this space, right? So my own level of awareness of what DAP can really do for an organization, right? My proficiency level. How good am I at this thing today? And then based on that, what quick win opportunities could I deliver on right now with my current box of tools, right, to gain broader buy-in from my organization? Or where do I need to grow my knowledge, right? So question number two, what's the current approach in my organization? Do we think of DAP as a point solution, or do we think of it as an integrated part of that constant change machine? Most importantly, right, do I need to evolve, or do we need to evolve to improve our bottom line? Number three, what do my end users feel? Look, with all this constant change, where is there friction happening? You need to listen for that kind of a noise in your organization. Find the use cases, right? Sometimes I think that all of the formal research in the world really won't tell you as compelling of a story as the noise that you hear from boots on the ground, right? The excitement generated when you solve an unpopular pain point is the thing we all like most about this job, right? So lastly, number 4, can I show the impact of my work? Are we moving the needle? Are my people in the organization able to see the business impact of that? Now, Scott is going to pop back in towards the end to top us off with some live product demonstrations, but use that visual format, follow his lead. These are tried and true ways of helping your audience see that transformative power of DAP. All right. So what is it that we actually enable at KPMG? All right. So there are a number of key functions at KPMG. Most of these exist in your company in some form or another, but not all are owned by you outright, are they? Right? You probably don't own all of change management or all of your company's modernization efforts. That responsibility is shared, right? And it's the same for us, right? We don't own enterprise experience per se. We don't own change. We don't own process efficiency. And if you're wondering, like, no, we don't own Six Sigma or Kaizen or Agile or TQM or any of these other methodologies that aim to make tech better. But what we do is we help enable, right, each of these functions in a really innovative way that we just simply couldn't do before DAP, right? So enablement might sound like a bit of a buzzword by now, but it's how we describe what we do. All right, so I'm going to use an analogy that kind of makes sense in my mind. And Amy, you can attest to this, but anybody who knows me knows that I like home improvement, right? What we do, we give our organization a gift card to the big box home improvement store, right? Which lets those interested shop around tons of great options and what to buy to improve their house. So think of that as your Walme apps, right? Those are your tracked events, your smart walkthroughs, your automations. We'll walk through the aisles until you get a sense for what you need for your house. We'll walk with you, right? And then we partner you with one of our expert plumbers or roofers or interior decorators, right, to do the actual work at the house. And then depending on their level of interest, because usually by now the ideas are flying, we even give them the DIY handbook so they can learn to do that themselves. And really all of this to say that our goal and what works for us here is to keep DAP in the middle of all of these as a key facilitator to grease the skids and really enable faster wins in each of these key functions.
Oh my goodness, Matt, you and your do-it-yourself analogies and building things from the ground up, which is very true and a great place to come to and find all of those different tools, starts with a great foundation. So tell us a little bit about how we saw this vision and how we brought DAP and the idea of it to here at KPMG.
Yeah, it's a good question, Amy. It's really one foot in front of the other. So for the audience, right? If you think back to question 1 about DAP awareness, or question 2 about the structure of the way you operate today, and you're thinking to yourself, kind of, man, that last visual felt a little aspirational, or maybe my company's too resistant to this type of a concept. Well, it felt like that for us too, right? We saw an opportunity. And it's like that old adage, right? How do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time. And we started small. So when we joined the firm, the first order of business really was to replace an older legacy help system that wasn't supporting our SAP users in the way they needed. Now, in a very condensed amount of time, and I'm talking a couple of months, right, Amy? We not only had to manage the installation and the IT considerations of DAP at the firm, but from that use case perspective, we had to assess kind of like what aspects of the old system were good and that we wanted to keep, and more importantly, what we needed to do better. So this was a very training, reinforcement focused play, right? It was a lot of smart tips, a lot of shout outs, usage analysis, but with an organized approach, right? And with some help from the change management team and our platform SMEs, we were able to deliver something that was significantly better than before. And we were able to prove that value quickly. So Amy's going to talk more about this use case in a little bit because it's still one of our bigger ongoing projects. But this initial replacement effort, guys, along with like really highly visible, awareness focused content that was in your face, it really opened the door for us in terms of like credibility and reach. And it got us that invitation to apply some of the magic of WalkMe in the next handful of key systems. So in ServiceNow, which is our next example, right? We were tasked with helping solving issues like process and feature adoption. So I'm going to highlight one particular use case. It's in our legal portal. We had users, a lot of times in a sales role, they were unsure of what form to submit. And that was a big problem. When we sign new clients, there are legal reviews. And with so many forms to choose from, users were often submitting the wrong form or duplicate forms, which would then need to be investigated by the lawyers on the receiving end, right? So it's really a reflection of a complex sort of matrixed organization and complicated approval process. And I'm not sure if that sounds familiar to anybody on the call. I'm sure it does, right? So now, ultimately, the underlying design issues that caused the friction, they were addressed natively with the app itself. But for a fairly long chunk of time, they were not, right? In our WalkMe solutions, and we used a visual decision tree, a number of different automations and error proofing logic. That proved to be extremely helpful during that period of time. And again, it got us that additional authority we needed to keep going and to pursue more. So before I pass it back to Amy, this next application was something that really helped crystallize for us that this thing had legs, right? And it helped to reach a broad audience that was really thirsty for this type of personalized, user-focused support, all right? So Profinda is a people resource management application. It helps companies like ours inventory the huge array of skills that our professionals have, which is really vast, right? We have people with skills from all across the board. And it serves as a networking tool, right, to help deploy the right skills to the right project across the whole firm. So talk about change, right? The vision of that is pretty easy to see. It's easy to see the value of a tool like that, but the adoption of that is a whole nother thing, right? Behavior change, right? It's not simple to change the way that people act, right? And we've been doing things the old way for a long time. So here's the challenge. How does the company get our professionals to tee up their new profile in a really consistent way that's uniform, it's loaded with the right data about your skills and your proficiency, and most importantly, right, it's searchable. And we need to get that done in a matter of months. Oh, and by the way, it has to be segmented so that it goes out in waves to the right audience. That's a challenge, right? So with a couple of wins already under our belt, we sort of raised our hands and we said, put me in, coach. And he said, we can do this, right? And look, none of this stuff is rocket science. You already know what good looks like. You've seen good, right? It's about simple language, visual instructions, automating steps that shouldn't exist in the first place. And it's, engaging users with launchers and permalinks and tracking their progress and nudging them along and reminding them to complete it. And here's the coolest part, right? Like, it's all within reach. You have these tools already in your toolbox. So I think it was at this point in our evolution, right, where we took a moment to breathe and collect ourselves. And that was a lot, but we got through it. But we looked at each other and I think we said, you know what, let's do this thing. Let's make it real. So the next order of business was demand. You've heard Marshall Goldsmith, what got you here won't get you there. Let's document every darn use case that we can find, right? Interview folks from every corner of the business. And let's make a case for expanding the scope of what our team can help with. So, Amy, could you please help take the wheel for a couple of minutes and just show the group sort of where we are now in terms of our people and our process and our tech?
Thanks, Matt. Yes, at this point in our journey, the demand exercise was necessary because it ended up telling us a couple of different things that really people were excited about what we were doing. And there was a need for it in the organization, so much so that, well, I mean, some of the numbers start to just speak for themselves. As of right now, we have a total of 8 team members, but that started with one new team member we hired full-time shortly after our exhaustive sprint to get everything started and going. But over time, that included another 5 people, which brings our team total to 8, 3 of which are people managers, and a team that is 15 times certified over and still growing. That's in and of itself amazing. But why this number and why this amount and why this talented group of individuals? Well, it's what the exercise still also told us, right? So we knew there was interest both with our enterprise applications like performance management and our CRM, as well as interest in our business specific applications. So people were interested, people were clamoring for, what we were offering. So it made sense to grow the team out to help support what now becomes really our process and what we do here at KPMG. So on the enterprise side of the house, we have all of our systems seen by everyone. That's its basic definition. So performance management, CRM, profile management, all of that managed by a team dedicated to those systems for a consistent look and feel so that everyone knows these are our enterprise applications. Here's where WalkMe is being applied, as well as those business specific applications that I spoke of earlier, where teams with their niche applications to help them out in the field were looking for better support, better tools to help enable what their employees were doing. So a team dedicated to those platforms to help dig into business specific processes and what those systems served. Same thing though with consistency and having that same look and feel, which gets us to standardized branding. As you guys can see, there's a tiny sample of our custom launcher that we've done that it follows our company color scheme, and that color scheme extends to a customized menu as well, so that on all of these projects, there's a little bit of us, the DAP COE, they're standard, consistent, always present, but ever growing and ever knowing that there is help right there when we need it and how we see it. So having all of these things in place and having this team now in place to help do all these different things across 60 plus applications. Is that number right? I think that's the right number, but still growing. It meant that we also needed to look into really getting tech ready to support all of this work too. So some of that included being IDP ready, knowing that these systems were connected to the right identity provider, helped us out in making the most of what WalkMe offers in its tool set. So consistent email, having that same identifier from system A to system B, knowing Amy went into performance management and then I went into the CRM because I had to help with some WalkMe content, but having that consistent, again, consistent being the theme, consistent piece of information that not only we use as builders in helping create those great experiences, but also taking advantage of things like reporting, insights, being able to track the user's journey across the applications that we were building across. But its impact was great too on the business side because of those niche applications. We were also finding that the information that the teams would share with us warranted even more information, even more detail, sometimes to the point that the teams would say, Amy, we want to build it ourselves. What can we do? Can we learn WalkMe? And our answer was yes. And thus the community builders were born. This group of individuals, which is 16 and still growing today, really learn WalkMe from us. They took advantage of our lessons learned and everything we've seen based on our infrastructure, what we've set up with IDP, what we've learned with our tools today to become WalkMe builders and take charge of what makes the most sense for their applications. Because like we believe, right information, right place, right tools, right time, we give them that knowledge and in turn support them as they build out their respective WalkMe content with our support and with our guidance from our community builder program. But as amazing as all of this is, it doesn't really happen without just us, the DAP COE. It's a collective effort. You have community builders, you have processes that help with that information. And some of that insight starts with some of the tools that we use to help, figure out what platform should we put WalkMe on, how we should be solving for these problems. So let's take a really quick look at some of the information that we helped capture today. We'll start with our intake process. So intake for us is a basic form that has what we call some knockout questions, providing some guidelines to help us figure out where does this make sense for us to put WalkMe on.
Can I jump in and ask you a clarifying question here? So are you telling us that, you're talking about sort of setting a baseline for where we can or should put WalkMe, it sounds like. So, does that mean that there's more than one form that's being used, sort of like intake versus scoping per se?
It's a great question, Matt. Intake for us, it's great because it captures some of the basic, if you will, that box that we are starting to build the great foundation. It gives us that initial foundation that says, where can we put WalkMe on? If we think about it, some of these questions help us in a number of different ways. It gets us to operational scale because we do have to think about where can we genuinely apply WalkMe? Does it work for this use case? Does it help us prioritize where we, place WalkMe next, given the breadth of work and what our pipeline looks like as a result of these intake questions? Some of which you see on the screen, which include the size of the audience, so who has access to the application versus who's actually performing the process, right? So you might tell me, Amy, my application, serves the entire firm. Okay, great, that's 50,000 people. But your process or what you're doing only serves 20, 30, maybe 40 people. How does that help us then figure out what that priority looks like, or when should we go and work on that particular project? It even also helps us sometimes determine maybe at this time it's something we can't serve because it's something genuinely that's not in our tool set, but it gives us that vision and that leeway to say, hey, we hear you, we understand you need it. So let's go ahead and make sure that we keep track of your information so that when we do have that tool and when we're ready, we can go ahead and move on to looking at your particular request. So Matt brings up a good point. Is there a difference? Absolutely. So if there's intake to help us start that initial baseline, scoping, on the other hand, is going to get us that detail or the heart of why you want WalkMe on your solution. So you're looking at more detailed questions that help set goals, which are so important so that everybody can agree on what it is you're working towards, but also the business problems that we're trying to solve for. What you're seeing is just a sampling of the questions that we actually talk through. Yeah, it's an Excel file. We do what must be done to capture everything, but in that file, we ask some of these questions so we can grab that information, we can document it, and everybody knows these are the problems, these are the different things we're trying to solve for, and the goals and the outcomes that help support that. But what's great about this tool is that it's not only used by the DAP COE, but it's also done by some of our friendlies that we work with in the organization. That includes people from our organizational change management organization, as well as L&D. And why this is so great is that it's one consistent base that everyone works from to help us bring all the solutions together, figure out what must be done for that platform. And it gives everybody a consistent really style and tone to asking all of the same questions and the whys and the hows in order for us to look at a project and work on it as we move forward. But like I said, though, it takes a village. You need the right, Matt also said, you need the right plumbers. Let's just bring the whole construction crew together and make this great house. And what that looks like is something that you see on the screen here. It is a genuine village of people that gets us to things like results that we see today. From November 2023 to January 2024, these are numbers that just reflect a little bit of some of the activity that all of this work that started from our early projects to now has gotten us to. And I want to focus on the upper corner where we see our SAP logo and the number 600,000 smart tip views. Wow. I mean, that's an amazing number. In just a short amount of time, 600,000 smart tip views and counting. And this kind of effort wouldn't have been realized without the support of our organizational change management and release management teams, both charged with helping prepare for change, as well as informing us of what's new and why something new is being introduced in these applications. With these groups, we worked from turning traditional communications via email to telling people about what's new and chances are you'd skip over the email because it said something like what's new and it's about a system, so you wouldn't see it. Transitioning from an email to in-app announcements, letting people know right place, right time. Here's what's new. Here's a quick tour about it. And then they're done and informed and on their way. We continue this practice today and have found great success with it as a result of making that transition because we did it with the help of so many great teams. But it's not just all of these teams. We've also benefited from having a really great executive sponsor who has supported us throughout this journey. Matt, tell us a little bit about our executive sponsor and how they've helped us with digital adoption here at KPMG.
Yeah, it's so exciting still to see our work making an impact like this. I love it. But to Amy's point, what I want to emphasize is it's sometimes an underappreciated piece of the puzzle here. It's that executive sponsor role. So strong involvement from you and from change-focused individuals like people on that wheel we looked at earlier, right? You help keep the lights on, and they help broaden the portfolio of available work for us. And together, awesome, we can move boulders, right? But the executive sponsor is the one who can move mountains and see ahead to the next one. So what you can do today with that information, right, is you have to identify who your executive sponsor is and make sure that they're equipped with enough practical knowledge of DAP, right? Even including how it works so that they can go out there and advocate for you and for the program. Don't be afraid to make an editor account for them, give them some one-on-one time until they're familiar. It's a really important step in the process. So as we wrap up here, we have a few mountains of our own that we're looking to move. What's next for us, firstly, is a broad deployment of Walme Workstation. We're in late development, moving soon into a beta testing phase. We're aiming to improve the employee experience outright. You know, that one-click access to our own AI and enterprise search and those efficiency gains that we get from notifications and shuttling and desktop support, right? Really important play for us, big focus this year. In the middle, right? We're not the only ones facing the headwinds of constant change, right? We represent the United States from our seat, which is a big undertaking, but KPMG is made up of 270,000 employees across 143 countries. So we're looking for ways to broaden the DAP footprint and influence better adoption sort of globally by networking with our member firm counterparts. And, you know, we want to share our expertise and help support them however we can, because we've learned the hard way, but we've gone through these lessons learned so many times. And you might be thinking, you know, like, Matt, I have Walme on one application. How does any of this help me? So look, for us, opportunity might mean helping peers across the pond, but that's just an example. For you, this should be a reminder to explore your opportunities. And if they're there, you know, shoot your shot. Can't hurt. So lastly, before we transition to Scott for the fun part, there's AI transformation. The next installment of this webinar series is going to dive deeper into this topic, so make sure you join us here for that. You're not going to want to miss it. But you know, for years now, most of us here in the call have been working towards the goal of modernizing everything that we do so that it's digital. Right? You know, it wasn't that long ago that I can remember things still being done on paper and fax machines. It sounds crazy, but it wasn't that long ago. So we need to not forget what we learned from that wave of transformation and make sure that we apply it towards the coming wave of AI transformation. And it's hitting all of our businesses as we speak, right? And that's figuring out how to support adoption of our own AI applications, that's using the native AI capabilities that Walme brings to us to improve our team's work. And a big one, which is monitoring that tech stack for AI risk, you know, and responding with that. That is our presentation for today. I hope that this was helpful for everybody. You know, thank you so much for your time. Amy, thank you for your contributions. It was really great to be with you. We'll be happy to answer any questions that you have over in the chat. But Scott, if you would, sir, could you take it away?